Welcome to Management Matters. I'm James-Christian Blockwood. We're back with a special episode highlighting our recent panel of state and local government experts at our 2025 National Conference. Bridging the Gap, State and Local Capacity in a Shifting Federal Landscape, was moderated by Nisha Botchwey, Dean of the University of Minnesota's Hubert Humphrey School of Public Affairs, and included panelists David Adkins, Executive Director at the Council of State Governments, Matt Chase, Executive Director and CEO of the National Association of Counties, and Julia Novak, Executive Director and CEO of the International City-County Management Association. From administering elections and managing public health to responding to disasters and maintaining infrastructure, the conversation underscores the fundamental role of state and local governments in delivering public services in the United States.
When we speak of capacity at the state and local level in today's era of shifting federal priorities, what do we mean by capacity? Is it about staffing and budgets, leadership and networks, regulatory flexibility, all of the above? Who'd like to start?
Well, good morning. My name is Matt Chase. I'm the Executive Director of the National Association of Counties. So we have 3,069 counties across this country. We invest about $770 billion a year into our communities. I have the luxury of representing 40,000 elected officials in 3.6 million county workforce. 2% of the entire U.S. workforce works for county government, so 1 out of every 50. Yet we're probably the most misunderstood level of government. When we talk about capacity these days, I think we have to start with political will first. Do we have the political capacity to compromise, to think forward, and try and build better communities? Right now, when I ask county administrators what is the number one challenge that they face, you would think it's political challenges, credit ratings, finances. The number one challenge is workforce. A lot of our counties have 10 to 30% vacancies across the organization. And if you dig into key departments like elections, like public health, like law enforcement, particularly jail management staff, huge challenges with capacity there. But I think, just to wrap up, I think our biggest challenge is allowing our public administrators to take risk. We have a saying, when you are in the private sector, you celebrate innovation. When you're in the public sector, you investigate it. And we joke, but there are bloggers, there are news columnists, there's media, there's social media, there's neighborhood watchdogs, that anytime a city or a county try and innovate and try something differently, they get pounced on. And so we've created an environment where you can't take risk. But yet, going back to what Graham is trying to do to solve homelessness in California or deal with public health and some of these issues, status quo is not going to be an option. And so how do we build the capacity to allow the public sector to evolve and to improve when we also have challenges with federal and state policymakers who are doubling down on creating a risk-averse environment?
Thanks, Matt. David?
First of all, I just want to say to all of the fellows and others that are here, thank you for your commitment to your profession, many of whom have pursued good government for decades. There's never been a time where professionalism, competence, and a commitment to the common good has ever been more important. And your longstanding careers to advance those noble goods is so important. So thank you for your public service. To me, capacity, I have a good friend who's a psychiatrist. He's always worrying about capacity with people. Do they have the ability to make decisions in their own best interest? And I suppose there are many that would say that aspects of our government should probably be on a 72-hour hold, not able to get out among the regular people. But the fact of the matter is, for me, capacity is pretty simple. Against all of the ways in which our founders and our politics conspire to devolve power, to have separation of branches, of intergovernmental layers, despite all of that and the current headwinds, is our system of self-government still capable of solving problems? Are we, the people, capable of having our best aspirations, our needs, our collective will manifested in our institutions of government? And so when I think about capacity, the things that I would want to focus on is the culture of our state, cities, and nation? Is the electorate? Are the institutions that have been formed all capable and willing to commit themselves to a process by which public goods are distributed in ways that solve people's problems? And that has been something subject to lots of good debate and conversation for over 250 years, and it continues today.
Thanks, David. Julia.
I was struck this morning as folks were talking about the need to reboot government. And to me, the capacity issue begins with the political challenges, because we can talk about government being broken, but is it really governance that is at the forefront of the issues? And so as that trickles down to the local level where our members are there, the capacity may not exist. There may be vacancies. There may be a critical workforce challenge, but the work has to get done, because it gets done first in those local governments when there is a catastrophe, natural or man-made. When there is an election, the very cornerstone of democracy is around fair elections. That all happens at the local level. Yes, capacity be damned. It's going to get done when it comes to the front door.
So I want to ask a question about the federal landscape change, how from shifting block grants to mandates, evolving intergovernmental partnerships, and divided political control, how are you seeing those things affect state and local government capacity today?
I think it begins, there's the chaos that is the way the changes are being made, the policy chaos. I think what's so challenging for our local governments is that there is no policy intent of what this means from how does the tax flow change? If this level of government is no longer in this business and we are suddenly, then how does the money flow? And that is just simply what is not there right now. And I think that is a huge challenge for our local governments, work that has to get done at the local level, without previously reliable partners there to assist is truly one of those big challenges that our local governments are facing.
David, you talked about the need to get things done as well. How would you respond to this question?
First, it feels like this is the tale of two cities. It's the best of times. It's the worst of times. The disruption, the volatility, it all feels like tactics without a strategy. It feels like literally the bull in a china shop, bouncing from one item to the next without any kind of cohesion or framework in which to think about this disruption. And that can lead to despair. You can categorize it as just cruelty or just a lack of competence to understand how complex institutions work. That being said, I actually think that this is also a window of opportunity for innovation. And just as the pandemic encouraged us to think in new ways, and some results good, some results bad, what is happening right now, I think, is an opportunity for the states to challenge themselves. Does that moniker, the laboratories of democracy, hold up? Are they willing to innovate in times in which volatility and ambiguity actually is an invitation to innovate? And I think what I see is at the local level and at the state level, people of good intention coming together to work across boundaries, to focus on data-driven solutions, and actually making progress. The advent of artificial intelligence is going to completely change the customer service model for most levels of government. I think it also provides an opportunity for cohesion in data sets to help drive policy and hopefully incentivize collaboration between local and state governments. That being said, there are headwinds. We have a number of legislatures, state governments that are now one-party control. The brilliance of our system is sort of seen in this two-party structure in which there is always a viable minority that is capable of obtaining power and therefore is accommodated in compromise, the essence of comedy in solving problems. What we've seen is more entrenched one-party government in states. And with that, I think comes a greater interest in performative politics rather than policy and problem solving. And that can lead to a corrosion that is more focused on maintaining power than in solving problems. it also results in culture issues coming to the forefront, which again is fueled by social media and this performative nature of politics. But when that happens, incentives are given for state government to preempt local government. And if the states are the laboratories of democracy, cities and counties are the petri dishes and test tubes of those laboratories. And so when you're preempting the work, the autonomy, the ability of cities and counties to innovate, those laboratories are greatly compromised. And I think what we also see beyond this Republican and Democratic polarization, there is a rural-urban divide. And in many states that have red unified state government, the economic engine of that state is more likely to be a blue metropolitan area with a Democratic governor. And I think this moment calls for the kinds of collaborations around issues that people care about. And we're seeing it with housing. It will emerge with emergency response in the wake of the disruptions at FEMA, in which hopefully the weight of catastrophe will be a catalyst for collaboration. And I think we're seeing that in some areas, but when it comes to housing or public transportation, racial equity, economic mobility, sometimes there's a huge disconnect between state level government and city government that I think gets in the way of actually making progress where there is lots of common ground.
Matt, lots of common ground. What are the solutions on the county side from your perspective?
So just to David's point, though, as counties, we have two bankers, two parents, federal government and state government, and we're in the crosshairs. In some states, counties are in a Republican state where the governor and legislature might be doubling down on the Trump administration's policies and trying to embed them into state law and state practice as well. In other cases, they might be in a state that's more blue and part of the resistance in fighting every federal directive that's out there. Where we're at is the intersection of policy and practice. And at what point does that change politics? And I'll give you a couple of examples where publicly certain people might be rooting for the administration's executive orders and policies, but in practice, they're starting to see on the ground that it's not really good politics. So we're in the middle of the longest shutdown now in our history, and I know a lot of folks are focused on, will we get a full year appropriation? Will there be congressionally directed earmarks? One of our biggest concerns is, our executive order is going to be embedded as policy riders into these bills. That's what scares us more than the funding. When you look at executive orders, we cover domestic policy A to Z. So we have executive orders on elections, on obviously immigration, with energy, which is one that has not gotten a lot of coverage, is just about any energy project can now be deemed national security. Not just the 400 counties that are dealing with data centers, but the transmission lines and anything deemed as essential minerals, rare earth minerals, any sort of mining can also be exempted from state and local permitting. When you come on to things like HR 1 and the things that we're dealing with, Medicaid is a huge issue for counties. We own over 1,000 critical access hospitals. Cook County's hospital system is $5 billion a year. Just their hospital system that the county funds is $5 billion a year. We have 1,000 hospitals. We fund Medicaid with the states in 25 states at about $60 billion a year. So if we're going to cut back on ACA premiums as well as Medicaid, we know what will happen. Folks will end up in our county jail for healthcare. And we've spent 10 years trying to avoid that. In SNAP, we administer SNAP in 10 states. Over 50% of the U.S. population lives in those 10 states. Big ones like California, New York, Ohio, etc. Counties are trying to backfill SNAP benefits. One, you can't even do it from a technology perspective. So you can say you're going to do it, but can you actually get the computers to talk and actually transfer the money onto the cards? Doubtful, especially in a week. But so counties are having to figure out, if we're not going to fund SNAP and 43 million people lose food security, how do we then fund food banks, nonprofits, who also are already facing shortages? But I think folks have not also looked at what HR1 did on clean energy, and where we're seeing a huge surge in projects because they have to have these facilities completed in the next 18 months or so. And what will happen when we have this huge upfront investment, which is really propping up the economy. Once that's done, is that when the cliff occurs in 18 months? So those are just a couple of the things that we're dealing with. David mentioned FEMA as well. Counties are cash flowing billions and billions of dollars of FEMA. Billions of dollars. We have a county in Georgia, just one simple example, $20 million a year annual budget. They're cash flowing $60 million for debris removal from Hurricane Helene. That happens every day. $20 million a year budget, cash flowing $60 million, and they will cash flow that probably for 3 years before they get reimbursed. So when we talk about capacity and practical challenges, what I really would encourage NAPA to do is we got to get beyond the political discussion and get down to the human level and really tell the stories of the real world implications of when government doesn't function.
And thank you for that transition. What should we do? We as NAPA, the people who are the institution, as the dean of the Humphrey School, one of the things that Hubert Humphrey would implore folks who would listen to him is not just to complain about it, but to do something about it, right? And so what are we going to do in this shifting federal landscape? Julie, I wonder if you might talk about, from the vantage point of ICMA and city county managers, what are the emerging capacity building strategies, these solutions at the municipal level, especially in smaller or mid-sized communities that may not have the same resources as metro areas?
Yeah, I think our smaller jurisdictions, rural jurisdictions, those are places where services have to happen. And I think this is where government gets gritty to get it done. You know, there is the workforce challenge requires collaboration in a different way. Because it may be that you have to build and grow your own because you're not going to attract from the outside. So that looks like partnerships. That looks like innovative programs with community colleges to actually encourage people in areas to get CDLs so they can work for the local government. And so I think we see those types of things happening in a very meaningful way in order to rise up and address some of the workforce challenges, especially in our, rural, not urban communities.
Matt, you started us off with workforce. You noted that as a primary area of capacity concerns. How would you add to this perspective?
Yeah, I mean, from a NACO perspective, partnering with our state associations that are siblings, what we've said is the cavalry's not coming to save us. Federal and state government is not coming to save us. So this has been happening for 10 years. So we have been building communities where we're crowdsourcing. As I said, we have 2% of the U.S. workforce. We've got really smart, talented people, and we're building relationships. So, for example, NACO, we actually built our own PBM for prescription drugs. As a collective, we're bigger than Walmart. We're bigger than Amazon. We have more employees. And we went to the market and said, we're going to buy our prescription drugs for our workforce together, and you're going to give us better pricing. And we're saving counties millions of dollars.
Did you hear the wow? There was a wow over here.
Yeah, I mean, look, we had to go hire really smart people from the private sector that used to sit on the other side of the table, and we brought them to our side of the table. We've been networking our CIOs for a long time. We have 1,200 county CIOs that get together on a regular basis. We're getting together with procurement professionals, because we can talk Gen AI all we want, but if we can't procure the technology at the right speed, and especially the way it's going to be tough. So I think what we're trying to do is get people together. We call it coalitions of the willing. Who wants to advance? Who wants to do it right? Last week, we had our 25 major urban county administrators, counties a million and above. We spent the day at SAS Corporation in North Carolina studying AI. We've been to Microsoft, to OpenAI, to Google, to Salesforce, to DocuSign. We're going to steal their intellectual property and to say, it's not necessarily that we're just going to procure your services. We want to learn what you're doing. And if we can do it ourselves, we're going to do it ourselves. In our rural states, our state associations have basically become back offices to the counties. particularly on technology, on procurement, on elections administration. We're basically forming these statewide council of governments, if you will, to make sure that the rural areas aren't left behind. But the bottom line is we're not going to wait for the federal government in the states. They're going to be our barrier in most cases. And again, we're not perfect. We got all sorts of problems, but from a grassroots level, we're trying to find those that are trying to move ahead, make sure they know each other, and provide the platform for them to try new things.
Would you highlight one or two solutions or innovations that you think would be beneficial for us? And then I'll ask the audience. I'm going to turn it over to you after David's response. We'll take a few questions from you, and then I'll end with one or two final questions from the panel. David?
Yeah, I think there's probably a pretty good intersectionality here between academics and those affiliated with universities and those that are engaged in public service. And I do believe that the nexus between our universities and our government could be enhanced. I know most universities, like the Humphrey School, would have these kinds of internship programs, but I think it's very difficult for government sometimes to interpret how academics approach their work, whether that be health policy or just evaluating a program's success. I think one of the great benefits of state and local government is, certainly in the case of city managers, most of them are nonpartisan. In the case of most legislatures, they have a nonpartisan staff. And there are some county level officials that also don't have R's and D's behind their names. It's an opportunity, particularly at the staffing level, for experts at a university to get real world experience in interfacing with those that are engaged in policymaking. The insights that they will gain are tremendous. The other aspect I would encourage is more inter-branch cooperation. We have a number of leadership development programs, and one of the differentiators for the Council of State Governments is that we work with all three branches of state government. I can't tell you how many times judicial officials are with legislators and executive branch officials in a multi-day leadership development program, and at the end, when we're debriefing with people, one of the legislators, it's almost for certain, but what they will say is, I got to know Barry. He's this judge, and I guess I just never really appreciated that judges are they're like people. And when you humanize it, there are interactions that build camaraderie, that is a part of a network, that all of you know how this works. I think we have to be more mindful about that. And then finally, I think our elections officials have shown the way about how you have to be aggressive in your communication. In today's world where conflict entrepreneurs and fearmongers are the currency of the attention economy, our election officials have decided to lean into transparency, to open up their doors, to invite people in, to let them look at the machines, let them understand how they work. And those of us who know local election officials at the county and state level know that these are some of the most incredible professionals who are at the absolute patriotic forefront of our democracy. And by having people come in and interact with them, you will have some of the most radicalized people actually become some of the biggest proponents of the local election office. And so I think we have to play social media at its own game, and that requires a certain level of openness and transparency. The internet speaks in a different language, and I think government has to give itself an invitation to meet people where they are. So universities, I think, have a bigger role to play. The nonpartisan staff at the local and state levels are very important. Interbranch work and this idea that a hyper focus on communication as it is done today is important for government.
NAP is the perfect place for these interventions to take place. We have a number of academic leaders as part of our fellows group. Could I just have those who are in the academy just raise their hands so we can see where you are? So as you're looking for partners, these are your partners in the academy. The message to make sure that we're humanizing the people who we're partnering with is really critical. And then election administration, really respecting the professionals they are and ensuring that they're getting the strong training to lead in those areas, but also can speak the language and not give up the radio or the internet or social media to other entities.
Management Matters is a presentation of the National Academy of Public Administration, produced by Lizzie Alwan and Matt Hampton, and edited by Matt Hampton.